All right, so we'll get this started. I'm Justin. We got Mike with me here. We're Zerto architects. I'm on the Tech Alliances team. Mike's on the cloud team. Mike's also an MVP, so we're going to direct all the Microsoft questions at him.
Yeah, all of it.
But we're here to basically talk about APIs, PowerShell, how you can automate things with Zerto. Hopefully make your lives a little bit easier day to day. If not, troubleshooting is in Heisberg's session. He's in the back. I think, what is yours, tomorrow or later today? Later today. So this is kind of part one for the certification track. There's a part 2 class. That's later today. There's a code at the end of the slides, both this session and the next one. So if you write those down and you take the certification test and the lab, then you get a certificate on shiny metallic looking paper. I was told it was metallic. Letdown number 1. So yeah. Anyway, before we get started, how many people have an understanding of PowerShell? Super, that'll make this easier. How about REST APIs? You came to the basic.
So the folks that raise their hand for REST APIs, are you sysadmins or are they actually developers? Are any developers in the room? Oh, okay. Well, that's good. We got some sysadmins that are actually using REST APIs. That's cool.
Are you using our APIs or just in general? General? Okay, cool.
In general.
All right, so probably didn't need this slide then, but again, it's the intro course. So what is an API? It's basically a set of rules on how two applications can talk to each other. So what we're trying to do with both our Zerto REST API and our Zerto PowerShell Cmdlets is give you a standard way to talk to Zerto via a script. So in a lab environment, 2, 3 hosts, whatever, probably not much of an advantage. But when you get into environments that have hundreds of hosts, thousands of VMs, even the 5 clicks that it takes to do something, that's a lot of clicks. What we're going to talk about is kind of, again, why you want to do that, what we can do, what we can't do, and kind of how we can integrate with different third-party tools.
So from an aspect of, why use the Zerto Cmdlets and the REST APIs, single script installations from, being able to actually put a ZVM in place and then be able to script out all of your VRA installations, and be able to script multiple things that can complete that installation for you. Just kind of like, doing a Windows build, if you will. The same kind of concept. The VRA, VPG, site, and failover automation, same concept. Being able to automate all of those functions and everything else that you need to do in order to complete a failover, whether it's a failover test or a failover live.
One of the things that we got listed here, but I don't think we're going to talk about it, the metrics and analytics extraction. I believe Heisberg is doing some stuff specifically around those APIs, but if you haven't seen the Zerto Analytics portal, we do some reports in ZVM, and then if you haven't been to analytics.zerto.com, we're basically giving you better reports. They look nicer, stuff like that, all through there. But that's got its own set of APIs that you can query to get statistical data and stuff out of that. So you're doing stuff on that, right? Okay, cool. So we're not going to touch on that. We're going to stick mostly with ZVM. But again, if that's of interest, definitely hit Heisberg's session later on today too.
The third-party tools integration as well. So I don't know how many folks here actually use, something like a ServiceNow, a service integration tool. You have the ability to actually integrate with that through the APIs, the ability to generate tickets based off of events, being able to actually kick off other things if you use tools like Ansible or Puppet, anything like that in your automation. Okay, so all that kind of ties together, and you can bring Zerto right into the fold.
Yeah, one of the examples that I helped a customer with recently, we were using some of our APIs to gather some of the more critical events in Zerto and send emails. But one of the other requests they had was to actually inject those into the Windows system event log in ZVM so that they can monitor them with SCOM and things like that. So that's just a basic example of what you can do. So if you already have a monitoring tool, Probably the easiest way to integrate with that is, again, through our APIs. So again, already said PowerShell and REST. Basically, the way that I usually start the conversation off is what scripting language do you want to use? If it's going to use PowerShell and what you're trying to accomplish is, I don't want to say simple, but not super complex, the PowerShell commandlets are much simpler and quicker to use. But if you want to develop, say, a bash script, or if you want to go as far as writing a completely custom front end, let's say you're a partner. I know that a few of them do this, where they'll literally completely rewrite the Zerto customer experience and totally use our APIs to do it. So pretty much anything's possible. It's just dependent on what you want to accomplish.
I can give an example is that, we have service providers, which I'm sure there are probably a few in the room here, that have their own front ends already for their customers. Even from an enterprise standpoint, we have a couple of enterprise customers that have their own front ends for their own divisions. Okay, so they may customize it where, you have a front end that you've created that help desk uses, that your engineers use, that your deployment team uses, that your DevOps use, so on and so forth. We've had, a couple of those customers actually integrate Zerto right into those existing portals. So everything that's run on the back end is via API. Nobody actually even touches the ZVM GUI anymore. So
again, we thought we'd list these out real quick. I'll go ahead and bring up the cons too. So with PowerShell, you guys all raised your hand. You pretty much all know the syntax of it. If statements, while statements, all that kind of stuff. Pretty easy to get started. You can run them on ZVM or on your desktop, whichever. And hopefully you're all part of the My Zerto forum community. So if somebody has a problem, you can post it. There's a huge community out there for it. The cons of it, Windows-based. So again, our MVP here, I was going to put that as a pro that you could use it on both. But ours right now is a snap-in, not a module. So we can't use it on.
Can't do snap-ins in PowerShell core.
Right. And the other things are too that you have to remember to actually install the module. You can't just start a script, expect it to work without the Zerto PowerShell module already installed. And then, of course, probably the biggest one, the reason why there is a REST API is because not everything that we can do is available in PowerShell.
Right.
So REST API, Mike, you wrote this part, so I'll let you do it. You had to remember. Yeah, so again, it's another way to communicate, right? If you think about a REST API a lot like a web server, basically there's a whole directory of things that you can ask us for and a specific structure, and then we're going to respond back in a given way. So again, a lot more flexible, and pretty much anything that can call a URL and inject headers and things like that, you can use to talk to our REST API with. So the cons I put first because there's a lot less, kind of. The reason I say kind of is because I'll show you guys in a little bit the difference between a PowerShell script and a REST script that do the exact same thing, and you'll see the size of the script, and that's why I say that it's a lot more complex and it can take more time. Outside of that, pretty much everything else is a pro. You can use pretty much any programming language you want, which means you have native Linux scripting capabilities. You can kind of integrate deeper in with Zerto. So for example, if you wanted to build a VPG, change the IP addresses, set specific networks, all that kind of stuff, a PowerShell command would be, this long. With a REST API, we can build out kind of a JSON, how do you want to say, like body metadata, whatever, and just say, hey, curl, take this and put it in the API call and send it, and it builds the whole VPG for you. You can still use them with PowerShell. So PowerShell comes with a really cool command called invoked REST method. Basically, it lets you do the same thing you would do in like bash and a curl with invoke REST method. And then again, one of the best parts is that there's no software to install, right? It's just a URL. So as long as whatever scripting language you are trying to use has the ability to call a URL, you can use the REST API.
So I'm going to add on to that a little bit because JP and I had a conversation. There's really, like he said, there's no software to install. But if you install certain pieces of software, it can greatly reduce the amount of stress you have creating RESTful API scripts. Specifically, one that will be in the session this afternoon, Postman, if anybody's worked with REST APIs. It really helps you understand the script and allows you to visually see the script in action. So that might be something you want to look at.
Yeah, so I didn't add that one to here because I assumed that we were like working with beginners. Looks like you guys all have a lot more experience. So for PowerShell, it's pretty easy. Probably the most common, the ISE that's built into all Windows boxes. It does some script highlighting, can help you debug stuff, things like that. You can also use Visual Studio's code. It's free. It does script highlighting, things like that. Works pretty well. I don't believe the scripts actually run there unless you add like an add-on down at the bottom, but you can just save them and then launch them in PowerShell. And then of course, Notepad. So, all script, you can use Notepad. This is Notepad++, so it does syntax highlighting. I'm not 100% sure on how accurate it is versus the other stuff, but again, it's pretty much whatever you want to use. From a Zerto resource perspective, we've got a lot of documentation on PowerShell. The first thing you need to do, though, is definitely go get the PowerShell Cmdlets. We update the Cmdlets with every release of Zerto. So if you're used to going out and downloading Zerto, you can go to the exact same spot and get the PowerShell Cmdlet zip file. And then the second one, make sure that you put it on both the machine you're writing the script on, as well as the ZVM if you want to run it on ZVM, or whatever machine you're going to run that script from. Because without us, basically, PowerShell doesn't know how to talk to Zerto. So some usage tips. These are the things that typically waste the first half of my day after I haven't programmed for a while. Everything Zerto does is typically 9669 except for the PowerShell API. It's 9080. That's usually the first thing that gets me. The second thing that gets me is that PowerShell doesn't use your credentials, right? So whatever you're used to logging in with, it doesn't use those. It uses a standard administrator and password. You should change that password. Link to an article on how to do it. But basically, it's separate. Just know that. And if you're trying to use like administrator at vsphere.com or .local, it's going to fail every time. Your script may be 100% right, but it's not the right username and password. We also have a lot of good, like I said, good documentation. I tried to keep the links short, but if you go to the My Zerto page, technical documentation, do a Control F, look for PowerShell, a bunch of good documents, good examples, stuff like that out there. The last one, so the team that I'm on, Tech Alliances, the tech marketing team also has a GitHub. So if you search for Zerto on GitHub, you're going to find our repositories. Their team does a lot more with like Zerto stuff. Our team, the one that I'm on, does a lot more with kind of partners. So variety of scripts on both, depending on what you're trying to do. Check them both out. But I did put some templates that we'll go through today up on ours. So I have a basic template on how to get started with PowerShell. The only thing it does is gets the sites, but it will prove to you that you can talk to ZVM, you can authenticate, and then you can build from there. Same with REST APIs. So some more usage tips. Again, if you have a script that doesn't have the first two, it's probably not going to run. The second one down, that's just a generic. If you've worked with PowerShell for any amount of time, you know that pretty much you have to run that. The top one has to be in all the Zerto scripts because that's what loads our snap in. Try catch finally. I don't use that. I usually just let the code blow up and then go back and try to figure out what happened. Mike added that one.
Yeah, so try catch and finally, for any of the folks in here that use different languages, it means a couple different things. If you use C# or you use Python or you use Java, whatever. But in PowerShell terms, The try catch finally is basically you're trying a block of code, okay? You issue a catch to catch what they call a terminating error, if there is a terminating error in that block of code. And then if that terminating error exists to do this. And then finally is just releasing all the variables that were put into that try block. So it's a really good way to do error catching when you're debugging your scripts.
The reusable code, again, lots of templates out there. I've tried to make a few available. I know Heisberg's got a whole library of stuff. In the lab, if you decide to take the automation lab, I'll give you a hint. The last part of it is like basically you have to build a script from scratch to do a failover test. The script is 75 lines long. You have 45 minutes or so to do a lab, right? Probably not going to be able to make that happen without reusing some code that was in the lab, step 1 and 2. So again, it shouldn't take you more than 5 minutes to make that script, but you're not going to be able to do that without reusing code. So document your code. It's kind of overrated, but
well, and don't reinvent. I just want to add one thing.
You don't need a document.
I know. No, you don't. Yeah, you don't need to document your code.
Job security.
No, the one thing I wanted to add was don't reinvent the wheel. Okay, there's really no reason to. I don't know if you know this, but I mean, if you were working with PowerShell, there's literally millions of scripts out there on the internet that you can actually beg, borrow, and steal existing code from and use because most of it's written under GPL or written under no license at all. So that's the reason why it's such an open community. It's a great community to actually utilize functions and variables and parameters and commandlets and things that are already existing. You don't have to start over from scratch unless you want to. But don't reinvent the wheel and frustrate yourself.
If you are going to copy somebody's code, make sure they documented it though.
Yeah, if you do copy somebody's code and they say give me credit, at least give them credit.
So this isn't really a script. It's just a way that you can test your workstation on whether or not the PowerShell commandlets are going to work for you. Basically, once you've installed the snap-in, run these 2 commands, and the only catch is that it's more than 2 lines. You actually have to type all of this stuff out. But it's a good way to see if you can get something like this back. So in my lab environment, I only had an AWS VPG at the time. So it lists out that. At least I know that I can talk to ZVM, and firewall ports between wherever I was at and ZVM are open. Everything works. And you could randomly go into our documentation and pull any get commandlet out, and it'll do the same thing. So REST API editors, again, if you're using REST inside of a PowerShell, you can use ISE. You can use Visual Studio's code. You can use Notepad again, or if you're on Linux, my personal favorite, Nano. I know everybody else probably uses like Emacs or something, but again, it's whatever you want to use.
Emacs?
Yeah. So again,
old school.
You're older than I am. So prerequisites for the REST API, going to go through the same thing, and I believe that all of our slides are available later, right? Yeah. So again, this one's kind of a little bit more tricky. The REST APIs always stay the same. The scripting language doesn't, so it's a little bit different setting it up. Really, you're just going to have to go out and do a Google search and say, I want to use Python for REST APIs. What do I need? And then basically you're just dropping our URLs into scripts is really all you're doing. So it is a little different again on authentication. Now we kind of go back to our normal way to do things. So if you're a VMware shop, it's administrator at vsphere.local or whatever other account you log into the GUI with, you should be able to use for here. If you're using Hyper-V, or if you're just used to using domain credentials instead of a vSphere domain, you can basically use whatever is going to have administrator access.
Quick hint, it's always good practice to not necessarily run all these commands under your account. So if anything goes wrong, you might not get blamed for it.
Use Mike's account.
But you may want to create a dedicated scripting account.
Or just one that doesn't point back to you, right? One thing to note, though, if you're going to debug a script, this isn't on any of the slides, but get commands are typically safe. So PowerShell or REST APIs, if you're doing a get, you can't hurt anything. If you're doing a put command or a post command or a set command in PowerShell, that's where you can affect the operation of what you're doing. So, just keep it in mind as you get more comfortable. You can kind of move from getting data into putting data and stuff, so that you don't instantly blow things up. So again, back to port 9669. So keep in mind that the Zerto GUI pretty much uses just REST APIs. I mean, there's some other things in there, but for the most part, we use these APIs to get what you see in the GUI. So you basically hit the same port, and you can execute all those commands from there. The first thing you have to do before you can do any of this, so with PowerShell, I guess I should say first, you actually pass the username and password every time you run a command. With REST API, you basically authenticate, and then it's good for 30 minutes. As long as you're making calls within 30 minutes, that session will stay alive. So they do time out after 30 minutes, so if you do walk away or something, and you're just running commands randomly, it will time out. You will have to re-authenticate after 30 minutes. We do, again, have more white papers. That's a shortcut, but it's just tech docs at my Zerto's page. You can find stuff there. And we actually have a big online help repository too, so it's either HTML or PDF. You can do it either way, search through it, stuff like that. You will have to use it in the lab, more than likely, because the script they have you write uses a REST API. So a little bit more about the templates that we were talking about. There's a direct link to the Tech Alliance and Tech Marketing's GitHubs. I don't know if Chris is here. I haven't heard, but so Chris Lewis, I don't know if he's here at the show or not. He works for a partner. He actually wrote a really cool PowerShell module that basically takes all the stuff we can do in REST and it makes it into a PowerShell command. You don't know if he's here, do you? He's not? Okay. So the only catch is that Zerto doesn't support it. So don't call us and ask help. You have to email him. People have done it. So anyway, again, more guides, and then ask your SE. There's a few of them in the room. There's one sitting right here in a Zerto shirt, so everybody ask him. But yeah, typically there are scripting examples. Again, we don't post them freely, not freely, but we don't just post everything out there. But if you ask your SE, usually there's examples of something that we can help you with. So thought we'd go through a few scripts here. We got, 20 minutes or so. So this one here, I didn't know they were going to do a lab exercise on it, so it's kind of a giveaway. But this one's PowerShell based, and basically all it does is it kicks off a failover test, and then when you're done, you can hit a key, type in just like you do in the GUI of whether it worked or not, and then the script will clean up for you. So here is my recovery site. As you can see, I just have vCenter, a VRA, and a ZVM, and that's it. Here are my VPGs that are replicating to this recovery site, and the recovery site is this lab 18. So there's two of them that we'll do a failover test on. One's called RDM, and the other one's a MySQL server. So this is the script to do it, and by no means I'm not trying to say that this has all the error catching and all that stuff in the world. Again, I just let it blow up and then troubleshoot from there. But basically, variables, load that snap in before you do anything else, and then basically there's really only 4 commands in here that are Zerto related. So the first 2 I have arrows to. Those are the start failover test PowerShell commandlets. It's pretty simple. You just say, hey, I want to start a failover test. Do these VPGs, so 1 in each, and then tell it information about where it's going to start that test at. So Zerto Virtual Manager, the port, the username, password, and whether or not I want you to have to hit confirm. If you just do the -false, that means that you're probably using it in a script and you don't have to hit the yes command. The reason I put the right host and the start sleep in there was because if you have applications that you're trying to kind of orchestrate, so I want the database server to come up first and then load an application, you can use regular old PowerShell stuff in the middle to be able to slow things down or do an if statement If you're smarter than me, you could probably have it like, wait until it can talk to SQL Server or something and then start something else. Sky's the limit. It's whatever you want to do. And then down, I'm basically saying, hey, wait for a key press. Once somebody presses a key, then go ahead and run the PowerShell commandlet to stop the failover test. So again, same thing you would do in the GUI. You'd go in, hit the rig red stop button, get a little box that says, hey, what do you want to do? So this is the first part. You can see that basically it's saying, hey, I started 2 things over at this site. Site matches, that's the VPG ID. So it's basically saying, hey, I started these groups over there. Testing recovery, just like you would see from the GUI. And then when I'm ready to shut down, this part got a little complicated. But basically, once you have finished test, press the key to clean up. I press the key, stopping the test, so it says RDM. And then here is where it basically is asking you the same thing in the GUI. Did it pass? And then give me an explanation. And then it's confirming that it cleaned up. And then the same thing for the other VPG. So 4 lines of code to start 2 VPGs. So it's pretty simple to do with PowerShell. This one here also kind of in the lab. I'm not going to actually walk through the script, but basically here's kind of a preview of what the lab does. If you want to actually see this in process, you can go to the lab. It'll show you how to do it. But if you have to deploy more than a few VRAs, you simply build out a spreadsheet. That's step 1. And you can use all the spreadsheet awesomeness, click and drag and increment IPs and all that good stuff. You fill in some details like what data store, network, that sort of thing, and you feed it into the script. The script goes through and does all that cool stuff, and the result is that you start seeing a bunch of stuff happen in vCenter.
Can I give a little hint? Do you mind?
Go for it.
Okay. So anybody in here heard of RV tools? Oh, awesome. You should. If you don't, if you're managing VMware, you should know about it. You can actually export all that host information into a CSV from RV tools. Just run it, export it, and use it for this script. Piece of cake.
So this is just a screenshot once it got done. So I redeployed both VRAs in my one lab via the script. So automated recovery plan. I don't actually have a script here because this is pretty easy in my opinion. You just take out the test part of the failover and you replace it with the live failover. So if you're looking to create the Staples Easy button, you can do it with a script. You just have to tell it what to start, what order to start it in, and then add all kinds of tests or whatever else you want to make sure it does it the way you want to do it. I put on here that you probably can't script every scenario because typically a script you're saying I want this to happen if the entire data center goes down. So what you're not going to get with a script is, oh, well, just SQL went down. Well, did you write a script for just failing over SQL? If not, then probably just easier to use the GUI. So I have one more session tomorrow afternoon. This one kind of a little bit of a real quick preview. Quiescent checkpoints. So Zerto doesn't do quiescing, right? We don't want to stop the write stream every time a write happens. So by default, we stream data, insert our Zerto checkpoints, which keeps everything, write order, fidelity, consistent type stuff. But if you actually wanted to stop an application, tell Zerto that it's quiet, and then start Zerto again, or the application again, you can do that with the APIs. So it exists in both PowerShell and REST. So you can literally build any script that you want to stop any database or pause it. So I have examples on MySQL, on Linux, Windows, MongoDB, SAP HANA. They're on the GitHub page. But basically what you can do is tell the database, hey, lock your tables, flush to disk. When that's done, it'll call Zerto, say insert a user checkpoint, and then it'll unlock the tables. So if you have a DBA that's difficult, you can have that database consistency just by running a script, even if it's Linux. Zerto does have a VSS version of the software. It's a separate SKU. You have to make sure you ask for it if you want VSS. This is kind of an alternative for different databases. So you don't need VSS, obviously, for Linux, but you can use a script to essentially get a database consistent checkpoint. So any questions? We got 10 minutes, 15 minutes?
Yeah, one back there, Shannon. Shannon and Aaron are holding the mics here, so if you
I'm
have a question.
gonna flip to this, so if you want to write down that code, you can, but
yeah. So I wanted to ask if the password has to be sent in clear text, or can we do like a get credentials and pass that to the Zerto API calls?
Yes. You could do again credentials and pass it as a variable. If you feel that's secure. That's okay.
Well, you're putting the clear,
Yeah.
the password was in clear text everywhere, you know.
Yeah, you can do it.
And it is executing in every line.
Yeah, you can do it.
yeah. Yeah, so again, all the tips and tricks that you can use in whatever scripting language you can apply to our APIs. So the get credentials thing is a PowerShell thing. It's not a Zerto thing.
Right.
You can, therefore use it with our stuff. Yes, sir. Run, Shannon, run. You could throw it.
Is that text file where you put in the credentials with the administrator hash exists today? Is that basically the credential repository
Correct.
for running PowerShell?
Right. So if for PowerShell, if you want to not use administrator, you can go to that text file, just delete the line, create whatever user you want, put the password hash behind it, and you'll have that user account.
Yep.
Easy session, all done. What?
Yeah, it's right before lunch.
Yeah, I don't think
Everybody
they
wants
rolled
to eat.
lunch out yet.
Oh,
so I
one
don't
way
know
in the
if-
back.
He's not allowed to ask questions.
Wait
He's got
a
black
minute,
shirt
wait a
on.
minute.
You wrote this. We can't. You
Yeah,
can't
you-
ask us a question. Like,
Everyone wants to know, this is the guy who wrote it.
Write it? Thanks.
thanks.
I'm just saying we're currently, Tamir, by the way, from Zerto, we're currently hardening this Cmdlets at the moment. So we're actually looking for future versions to remove that default administrator password. And you'll be able to enter whatever password you need in that text file. So it will be more secured.
So are we gonna still use that file, or are you going? Okay, so we're not gonna move it over to like the domain and stuff like that, or at least not right now.
We're actually debating about. This is a way too big audience for this. And I'm going to throw a bomb here, but we're actually debating the need for Cmdlets, as everything can be done in APIs and can be called from PowerShell. Whether we actually need to continue having
Writing
these
too.
two tracks, or whether Cmdlets are very much required. If you have any inputs on this, I would be more than happy to hear you throughout ZertoCON. I'm here if you want to catch me.
Yes, sir.
You guys have any scripts already set up for Oracle? I noticed you had all the databases listed there, pretty much that are all mainstream except for Oracle.
I don't remember if I did an Oracle one or not.
Could be done, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, so basically, the term that I'll use in my session tomorrow is basically lock, flush, unlock. If you can give me the command to lock and flush an Oracle database, I can put it in a script in like 2 minutes. Because it's literally, I did document this one, by the way. Basically, call the database, lock it, call Zerto, write the checkpoint, unlock the database. So it's more of just a database specific. I picked 3 that were kind of easy. You can do it to any of them.
To quickly comment on that, we have an Oracle white paper that actually contains an example using the commandlet, so we need to change it to the API, but we have the commands in place to do that for Oracle. Yeah.
Yeah, the API is pretty new, but yeah, it really the big thing. I mean, either one, the commandlet will do it, unless they take it out. But the API is just nicer because you can write Linux scripts with it. So, anybody else? What's for lunch? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Right up.
Yeah. No, not gonna happen.
Oh,
I'm just curious, can the API query, if I've done a failover test, can it tell me what state the machine is in? Can I get data back?
Sure, I mean, you could. That would probably be more of a vCenter or a Hyper-V call. Because we basically just call vCenter and say, hey, start this machine. After, I mean, don't get me wrong, we're doing some other magic under the covers, but the actual power on command is just a vCenter command, and then you would have to call vCenter and say, hey, is this machine on? So.
You had one over there. Did you have one, sir?
Currently, when I call the API, and I will say this isn't on the latest version, so maybe it's been fixed, but I open up a session, Zerto then opens up a session to the vCenter, but when I close the session to Zerto with the API, it leaves that connection open to the vCenter until it times out for 30
It's
minutes.
30 minutes, right?
Yeah.
The authentication?
Which, I mean, we've rectified it in other ways, but that actually caused us issues.
Causes
at one point.
vCenter to
Yeah,
show
like
a
I had
bunch of open
sessions
sessions.
like you wouldn't believe. I mean,
Smear,
we thought
Heisberg,
what
any
we were
comment
doing
on
and
it?
fixed it, but it, you know, not knowing that caused problems.
I would ask either Heisberg or Tamir, but we can get you an answer. We've got lots of people here that probably know more about that than I would. So.
Yes, sir.
Have you had any customers want to use the API on the AWS end for like Lambda functions or some other way to have AWS call out some Zerto functions?
What's AWS? I'm just kidding. I personally haven't, but again, I guess I'm in my own little bubble, right? So I don't know, we don't know what a lot of customers do unless they've called support and asked us for help or something
Yeah.
like that. Yes? I can repeat.
Maybe this is a moot point now, but can you guys not overwrite that user's text file every time I upgrade? I kind of want those to stay.
I don't know if Tamir, do you know if we overwrite that text file that we store the username and passwords in when we upgrade to like a newer version? Yeah.
If we do, we shouldn't. So if if you want to open up a ticket on this, we'll handle this.
So we should introduce Tamir. Tamir's a product owner for Zerto, so he's one of the guys that, in Office Space, like takes the user specs to the developers. Like he's that guy.
Yeah.
But no, he's awesome guy. So like I said, if he said stop him, if you got a comment or something, definitely do it because that's what they're here for. They want your feedback so they can make it better.
Yeah. Anything else?
All good. The again, the lab. Some of the examples we went through, you can actually do those in the lab if you don't want to, start on your production environment as soon as you get back. But there's also a test, and then, like I say, if you hit Heisberg session later today, what time is it? 3:45. 3:45. So 3:45. 4:45. I thought we had a hall crawl then. This place is going to be empty. But yeah, so later today, it's the only API session later today. So definitely hit that, get the other code, take the test in the lab, and get your metallic paper. Kevin had metallic paper. It was in the printer.
If you don't have a chance to take the test at ZertoCON,
It's in the
you
printer,
can take
that's
it
why.
after. So just save the codes, do the lab here, and then do the test. Do the test later.
No, you have to talk into the microphone.
I know,
so
I just
everybody can
realized
hear
that.
you.
We're good. All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.